Hello and welcome to today's recording, where we'll find out much more about our award winners from 2021. So they're going to be great case studies, and hopefully they'll try and help you understand why these case studies were our very worthy winners and what caught the attention of our judges today. So the category that we're going to be looking at is Best Approach to Risk Mitigation. And it was the Submarine Delivery Agency who were our winners, who were part of the MOD. And I'm joined by Commercial Director Jim Carter. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Emma. Hi, nice to be with you.
Great to have you here, and congratulations once again on your win. I'll hand over to you, Jim, and you can go through your submission, and then I'll come back at the end and ask you a few questions. So over to you.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. So hopefully you can see the slides, and let me talk through what I'm going to be presenting. So this, in a way, is the kind of the program on a page. In a nutshell, the program we ran and we continue to run helps us reveal and mitigate sub-tier supply chain risk. That's risk at a sort of the top of our supply chain, but also deeper in our supply chain to help protect this national endeavour that we undertake. So importantly, the approach we've adopted hasn't just illuminated fragility and risks sort of deeper in our supply chain. It's crucially allowed us to sort of systematically address those risks through collaborative interventions with our industry partners. So that harnesses the strength of the Submarine Delivery Agency, but also the whole submarine enterprise, rather than acting as a sort of standalone organisation. And we're also sharing, and I'll talk about how we're sharing that approach more widely across the Ministry of Defence and wider government, to build sort of strength and resilience at the heart of the supply chains that are so critical for public services. So the presentation will cover the kind of the challenge, or the opportunity, I should say, really, that we were presented with, our approach, the key issues we face along the way, and the outcome. And I think for a lot of procurement and commercial teams, the resilience of their supply chains has particularly come to the fore in recent years. Firstly, I think with the exit from the EU, but also under COVID, when this was so critical. So let me move on. So first of all, just in terms of a bit of scale and complexity. So the Submarine Delivery Agency spends circa sort of £3.5 billion each year on submarine sort of procurement and support. So we cover the kind of the build, the maintenance and the support, and ultimately the decommissioning and dismantling of submarines. Our programs are very long term, so that life cycle I just described can be up to 60 years from sort of concept to dismantling. And our supply chains are kind of narrow, understandably, but quite deep, and making them susceptible to disruption. So to give some context to the complexity on this picture, so a car has circa sort of 30,000 parts, a jumbo jet around 300,000, and a submarine around 3 million parts, many of which are really highly specialised. So that gives an idea of the complexity. So the opportunity we were faced was working really more closely on this endeavour with our prime suppliers. So our three kind of primes are BAE Systems, Babcock, Marine and Rolls-Royce, as you can see here. And we knew that to be successful in this, we really had to create an environment where there was sort of trust and mutual benefit, underpinned by some formal agreements, but to really achieve a level of transparency and openness that we hadn't achieved before. And the kind of risks, and I highlight some of them here on the slide, they're kind of pretty complex and myriad, actually. So you've got the sort of financial risks, so that might be your general financial health of the suppliers, availability of credit, risk of insolvency, or even exchange rate volatility actually. And then cyber, that I'm sure is a risk on a lot of people's sort of risk registers. You're really only as secure as the weakest link in the supply chain. Operational risks, so how are your suppliers performing, particularly at a deeper level? Are there capacity constraints, or sole source supply concentration issues, or skills shortages in any of your markets? And then legal, so there might be risks around sort of modern slavery or the social value agenda that government are driving. Or mergers and acquisitions. We've seen quite a lot of activity, particularly in the defence sector, with mergers and acquisitions recently as we come out of COVID. And then finally, the security, kind of foreign direct investment, or deeper in our supply chain. So I think, as I've mentioned, I think EU exit and COVID has exacerbated these issues. There's been a bit more fragility in the supply chain, and for our enterprise, if those supply chain risks materialise, that could delay or stop production, and these major maintenance projects that we undertake, and that could require really time-consuming fixes. It could stand down thousands of employees across our enterprise and cause multi-million pound sort of overruns. So that's what we were seeking to tackle. Now, the next two slides describe our approach, and we created a capability to sort of map, analyse, manage, and also intervene to address supply chain risk and performance. And really importantly, our approach enables us to turn the data into intelligence from which we can take collective action. So we follow this sort of four-step approach that you can see here. Firstly, to gather the data in, so we gather it from those primes, but also the Submarine Delivery Agency, and bring it in. Then there's a kind of an alignment and a categorization exercise that creates a compatible format for the data. It's then sort of cleansed and normalized. So you've got a database that runs a high volume of SQL coding to get that kind of right. And then finally, you're into this kind of visualization and querying, and that's about providing those usable insights into the supply chain. I mean, for obvious reasons, I won't be sharing some of those maps today, but they're really powerful, showing the kind of relationships and the connections between suppliers. And it reminds me a bit of an optometrist, when you get those sort of the lenses snapping in, and suddenly sort of different things come into focus, and those lenses that I described are kind of the what's revealed deep in the supply chain around the risks that I mentioned. So this also sort of represents the approach here. So the data is then reflected in our Boxar tool. So that stands for sort of boxes and arrows. And we enrich that data actually, for example, with sort of financial risk scores, parent company data, cyber risk as well. Often using open source data, so things like DNB Hoover's Company Watch. We also have a bespoke defence industry source called JustCar, and that kind of enriches and enhances the data set. And that then goes into the sort of box on the right-hand side of the slide, the supply chain improvement programme. So that brings together the four parties that I've outlined, and it sentences which suppliers, based on that data set, which suppliers require intervention, based upon the identified risk profiles, and a clear engagement methodology that balances the type of intervention that might be most effective with the kind of the need. And without question, this approach has safeguarded fragile suppliers who, without the help of this program, wouldn't have survived. I mean, initially, actually, the mapping capability was developed using external support, and we were exploiting the very latest commercial best practice there, but with a focus on sort of skills transfer to the in-house team, and that's been successful. So the capability is now provided purely in the team, and that's helped us deliver cost savings as we continue to deploy the methodology. It's been really invaluable, as I sort of mentioned, during COVID-19, prioritising fragile suppliers to make early interventions, and it's allowed us and our partners to mitigate failure risk and ensure a sustainable supply chain, maintained through, let's face it, a pretty difficult time for our industry and others in the UK. So I wanted to raise some of the kind of challenges. I mean, I think fundamentally what's striped across all of these areas is around sort of winning the hearts and minds and building trust, and that's so important in developing sort of healthy relationships with your supply chains. And in fact, I spoke about that in a previous case study on supply relationship management. So the initial data collection required our primes, who are often in competition, to provide significant data about their supply chains, knowing that we were going to uncover and expose those together. So we needed to invest quite a bit of time establishing how that process would work, to protect the commercial interests of the parties, but recognising there was enterprise benefit to all. And people are key in that. Fundamentally, you need to build that trust and kind of earn that and maintain it. And I think the establishment of that collaborative kind of program, that supply chain improvement program, was a sort of manifestation of that, really. And also, actually, not just that our primes were on board, but also that the sub-tier suppliers that we'd interact with had to also be convinced the program was there to help, which previous past experiences might have challenged. So, but the final thing I think I say on this slide is the sort of visualization and the SCIP processes, supply chain improvement program processes, seen on the right hand side of this slide, are kind of quite structured, and there's a set approach, but there's a bit of an art to this, and intervening deep in the supply chain to accelerate work or improve a relationship or expedite payment, for example, they can have ripple effects. So you need to really consider that and sort of scenario plan it. And supply chains kind of operate a bit like living organisms, and whilst we are crunching sort of big data here, we need to remain, I use the phrase, sort of paranoid of complacency, because there are unexpected events that can have pretty big impacts. I mean, we think back to the grounding of the tanker, the Ever Given, in the Suez Canal. There was a shortage of carbon dioxide that we experienced, and more recently, as I mentioned, there's lots of merger and acquisition activity, and that needs to be sort of played through in some of these models as well as COVID's impact continues. So finally, the outcome. So fundamentally, we were operating previously at quite arm's length from the supply chain, following the kind of line that the supply chain is a matter for our primes, and distancing ourselves from the supply chain issues. But for the kind of environment we find ourselves in, and because of its importance, we're taking a much more collaborative leadership role. We recognise actually that the supply chain risks are ultimately our risks, and we need to be able to take action. And improving supplier intelligence and the work with the prime has helped build a kind of enterprise picture of our exposure. And we've used this intelligence because we're not, it's not a big team, but we've used it to direct action towards the highest priority areas and continue to monitor. And as I said, that sort of resulted in a lot of successful collaborative interventions, and that safeguarded our supply and protected capability, organizations, and skills. And I think what we've also been able to do, and it plays to that point about our size, we've got sort of greater supplier coverage with the same resource, because previously multiple prime or submarine delivery agency teams might have been engaged with a single supplier. So we're much more coherent now as an enterprise, and that's sort of been played back in feedback from the supply chain, which has been another boon. So the final slide I was keen to share was just around some of the lessons. So I think this, the capability we've built and our approach, we see as having, further application, and is almost like a springboard, I think, for us. So not only actually in terms of the mindset we find ourselves in with our supply chain and a willingness to collaborate, that is new and different. But also, can these visualization tools be applied for other purposes? And we're sort of exploring that at the moment. I think in terms of this sort of middle pillar here, the commercial community, commercial function within the Ministry of Defence and wider government actually is very proactive about sharing best practice. In fact, in defence commercial, we have a sort of better together mantra, and we've shared our approach widely across defence, but also with wider government. And equally, and sort of adding to that, on the right hand side, we have a number of fora that the defence suppliers come together in, and we've shared the approach, and we see this as something we can kind of lift the overall capability of the sector. So we're very willing to share that for the betterment of all. So yeah, that's the case study, Emma. So yeah, back to you for any questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Jim. If you could stop sharing, that would be great. I mean, I was looking back at some of the judges' comments this morning before we started recording, and everyone was really blown away with the collaboration and the openness. And one thing to put processes in place to monitor and evaluate risk, but like that hearts and minds effort that went into it to build that trust, because that's the only way that you will really get the true picture. And you can really tell that collaboration where you say, supply chain risks are risks, we're all in this together. And for you to be able to really get that overview in what must have been the most challenging of times on the fragility of your supply chain, and to really focus your efforts, I think was really highly commendable. And the fact that you've created a blueprint for others to learn from as well. It's fascinating, brilliant project. So congratulations to everyone involved. I mean, that was really how I could sum up the conversation with the judges. So fabulous. So Jim, I mean, I saw you on the evening, and it was lovely to be back face to face. I mean, last year you were a winner, and we unfortunately got the news on Zoom. So this year it must have been really great to be in the room to hear that news.
Yeah, fantastic, and always unexpected, isn't it? So no, we were really delighted, and actually to pick up on your point around the collaboration, because I think organisations do try and do this themselves, but obviously our approach to do that more collaboratively is a bit different. And what was lovely actually is at the dinner, at the awards dinner, we had representatives from the supply chain on the table with us, so we could really share the success together, which was fantastic. But yeah, no, we were really delighted to win. It's a great, we know we've got lots more to do, but it's a great sort of fillip for the team.
Excellent stuff. And I mean, that it was quite an electric night, wasn't it, with no less than 3 standing ovations. So a tough year to win as well. So, congratulations again. What advice would you give to people who were thinking of entering? Have you got any encouraging words for people?
Well, I mean, be careful about the category you enter, I suppose. Thinking about the success of the vaccine task force, I mean, I think it was fantastic to see their success. Actually, I was really delighted for them. I think the advice would be don't leave your submission too late in terms of the drafting. These things take time, and I think in my experience, getting kind of testimonials from either the stakeholders or customers you're delivering services to, or your supply chain, can be really powerful. It's one thing you saying, that you've done a good project. It's great to get that sort of third-party endorsement. I'd also really encourage people to sort of be very careful about answering the question. I know that sometimes kind of good submissions can fall down a bit by kind of writing the answer to the question they want to be set rather than the actual question, if that makes sense. And really think about if there are tangible, quantifiable benefits to the project that they've done, really try and weave those in, particularly in the kind of final section of the application, just so you can really demonstrate the change or the impact your projects had. But I would always recommend teams to enter. I mean, I think it provides an opportunity to reflect on what you've done, maybe to think about how you might do things differently. But we spend a lot of time, racing from one thing to another, and actually a bit of time to reflect, capture the good work you've done can be very powerful for the team, I think.
Absolutely, sound advice, and I'd reiterate all of those points. Trying to get as many people involved in the submission as possible, key stakeholders, and not underestimating how much time it takes. Yeah, sound advice, and answering the exam questions. Yeah, great. Well, congratulations once again, Jim, and thanks for sharing your case study with us. And we hope we're going to read some submissions in 2022. So hopefully see you again then.
Thanks a lot, Emma. Thank you. Bye.